Come on, bud.
That I learned recently. That we ought to give pause to the harm reduction brigade.
Harm reduction, huh?
You realize that under Biden, there's been a further militarization of inner city police departments. So one of the reasons that Biden...
Hey, I thought we were cutting down on that, Jack.
He's gonna
top of that, you know, being progressive and being left is also to make sure that you're absolutely gung-ho with the State Department for war. That's being true leftist, right?
And almost uniformly, he's been worse. He's been worse for those people. So he's presided over the further militarization of inner city police departments. There's more military hardware, armored personnel carriers, and sonic weapons, and water cannons, and gas grenades being distributed to inner city police departments than at any point in the Trump presidency. Any point.
Hey, boy.
So harm reduction unless you're a black person living in the inner city, which was one of the reasons why we were told we had to vote for Joe Biden.
Or if you're a Haitian immigrant,
you know,
or
you
just
really
any immigrant in general.
marginalized people in this country,
Yeah, buddy.
it's possible they couldn't even survive another Trump term. Biden is worse.
Huh? Down?
Biden is worse. If you're a Haitian immigrant, Biden is worse. If you're an immigrant of any stripe, Biden is worse. There are more people being detained at the border now than at any point during the Trump presidency, and no movement.
But he's actually good. They're not cages anymore. Eh? They're not horrible slave to servitude in cages.
The one good
It's
thing
better.
people leaned on was the child tax credit, and that's going poof.
That already went poof.
It's not a solution to a problem that was a temporary.
No malarkey, fat. It's an early stream, yeah.
And that's right, actually.
I basically woke up to like, hey, State Department here, ready for war? State Department propaganda knocking down your door. CIA here. We like to ensure that you understand that Russia bad and they are just literal fucking savage animals that need to be taken out. Like, because we have to do something about the Russian question. Okay?
I'm going to call you a deeply unserious human.
My guy, Kyle Kalinske, my dude, what are we going to do about the Russian question, my guy?
I'm going to question anything that comes out of your mouth. Even if it's not directly related.
I'm one ethnic group away from literally being anti-Semitic. My guy, what are we going to do about the Russian question?
You either know it or you don't, and either way it's bad.
What I do with my pick? Unironically,
anytime politics.
I mean, he's just a State Department shithead at this point. I mean, he doesn't work for him or anything. I don't think that. I don't think he's literally like some CIA puppet, but he's saying their fucking narrative. He's saying their agenda to a T. He's buying it hook, line, and sinker, just like the rest of the fucking gullible fish.
My editor clip it out and put it up on YouTube. $500 or $600.
Also, it's just like, since when is it like a good idea to challenge imperialism by literally trying to support fascists and shit? With like the Azov Battalion and various different paramilitary organizations and separatist groups. Same for the Russian side too, by the way. There's like, both sides are fascist as fuck. Like the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, they're just fascist states that are trying to enact this whole like new Russia nationalist like ethno-state. They're fascists and Nazis too. I mean, like I look at this conflict, I'm like, Nazis killing Nazis? Fascists are killing fascists? Cool. Like at this point, it's just like, I mean, why should I give a fuck about what fascists are, you know, fighting about? While the fucking people underneath have to suffer for it. Which includes the Ukrainian and Russian people.
Josh is the exact type you were just
Like, they're, like, those are the motherfuckers I fucking, you know, feel for. Just the fascist state itself. It's like an oligarchical mob state, so, I mean, kinda. But they're straight up, like, they're, like, I was looking on some of these, like, figureheads. I'm not gonna remember all the names. So there's one guy who's, like, a philosopher in Russia, Alexander Dugin. He's kind of one of these proponents of this, like, annexation shit. And, like, straight up, all these different figureheads are literally just, like, were, at least near the end of the USSR's tenure, hardcore anti-communists and essentially, like, ultra-nationalist, like, fascist sympathizer types. And essentially have been trying to push that philosophy into the zeitgeist in the East, at least when it comes to, Russia. And same thing for Ukraine, too. They have the same lingo and, like, a lot of the similar shit, but it's like, well, we're actually superior, not the Russians. I mean, honestly, it's just fundamentally, like, a lot of that stupid, like, Slav supremacy bullshit. Like, we're better Slavs than you because we're better. It's just that shit, basically. It's like, you know, Bosnians looking at fucking goddamn Serbs and like, oh, you're like an inferior animal. Like, you're literally less than cattle or something. It's just like, it's like, fuck you. Like, get over yourselves. Just go buy a room and fuck and get it over with.
In fact, I think that if you're going to make any kind of argument for labor, you need to the fact that
it's just stupid ethnic, cultural bullshit.
And that
of like, oh, we're better than the others because they want to try to erase us.
There's just as much room for malfeasance in a union, and in fact, there's plenty of historical evidence.
I bet Ukrainians are going to give them some. That's their problem, ain't it?
So you have to. That's solidarity. That's what solidarity is about.
I mean, I suppose it's the problem of the Ukrainian people specifically, because they're the ones who suffer for it.
Defensive solidarity in the union. There's no way you're letting your leadership squander. It's the weakening of the union activity and the devaluing of it that happens even within unions. I talked to my mom about it. It happened in her union. Where slowly but surely it went from the center of everybody's work life to just a thing everybody did. And people weren't even worried about it.
That's kind of how it is right now, it feels like. Though I will admit, there is at least a new tentative agreement for our union and our actual, like, stores now. I learned that yesterday. So hopefully there's actually some good shit that comes from that. Because that's actually good fucking news.
Corporate interests and government interests moved in. You know,
I'm honestly hoping that just meant that, like, the fucking bosses from Albertsons and Safeways and shit, they got a little scared and didn't want to strike. So they conceded. That's my idea. Or at least that's what I hope. Like 200 nukes just because they were either set up or stored in Ukraine? Yeah. And from what I understand, the main reason why that was the case was so Russia would basically guarantee the sovereignty of Ukraine. They gave it in exchange for your American aid. Yeah. I mean, I'll say, like, I don't know every single tiny little bit of detail that is, like, led up to this type of shit. So when it came to, like, them giving up their nukes, I will admit, I don't know too much on that type of shit specifically. Though I will say that, I mean, especially in a world where nukes exist, I don't want to give them up either. Unless there's, like, a mass, unified, collective effort between all nations, you know, to do so. Which, of course, was not going to be the fucking case, nor is it ever. Sadly.
In a lot of ways. Very clearly definable ways. So, where's that argument? Where did it go? Was it ever there to begin with? Did the last electoral cycle ever happen? Well,
no.
In a reaction-heavy environment like the one we're living in, the answer is no.
Yeah, no.
You pay attention.
I remember fucking when Vosh had his talk with Paul, where he was like, oh yeah, the 2016 election, that was so long ago. It's like, dude, that's 5 years, that's like a little over 6 years ago now. That's not a long time ago. And he said that when it was like 4 years ago. Or at least about. Firmware, Ukraine didn't have the ability to keep them maintained anyway, so they can never upgrade them. Well, yeah. But honestly, fundamentally, that's, like, what's the point? Like, if you can't even maintain or keep them, why keep them?
That's why there's not another party. That's why there's never a viable party.
Honestly, it's just like, I don't, like, especially considering the degradation and what's going on here in this country, why, like, I don't want the U.S. period having any fucking involvement. We got our own shit to worry about. Like, I mean, it's like the Ukrainian people, like, they need, you know, good medicine and aid, but, I mean, it's like, it seems like the rest of Europe is doing pretty hunky-dory, you know, being able to do that.
People's passion, people's
I mean, at this rate, it's like,
political acumen.
there's, like, you know, the labor militancy here in this country is on the rise. Infrastructure's collapsing, healthcare shit. It's like, I mean, what, do you think war's gonna somehow make any of this shit better? It's literally gonna make everything here worse. Just as it's already been getting worse. But of course, that's why they want it, so they can keep you more distracted as shit does get worse. Because you can be more focused about, like, yeah, our good old American boys are, you know, helping out those Ukrainians. Or whatever the fuck. It's more of your input, in my opinion. Yeah.
Chomsky is overrated.
Like, honestly, like, to keep this from being World War III is to keep the U.S. out of it. Because honestly, no matter what, as much as people want to think, oh, Russia bad right now, and it's like the worst to world peace than America is, that's not true. No matter what, America will always be the biggest threat to world peace.
And then ignore everything.
We won't go to war? Exactly. And Russia's not stupid enough to attack a NATO country. Though America's stupid enough to do something that we might go to war, like set up a false flag attack. So, Russia's economy isn't necessarily doing great. That's also kind of the reason why they wanted to kind of advance in Ukraine, because there's a lot of expansion for agriculture that can help with that. And kind of help boost their economy a little bit, too. Like, Russia's got their own fucking reasons for doing this. That doesn't preclude fucking full-out war, because that doesn't actually bear well for them. All this posturing, all it does is just, you know, drain NATO's material and financial resources. Which, overall, helps Russia.
Or a book that you wrote about American imperialism.
Russia want to war with China. They're not going to. If anything, they're more likely to work together. In fact, I think China formally came out and said they would defend Russia if there was offensive aggression by NATO, like militarily, like in a full-on war. So that's not going to happen.
Like how easily labor was used and then discarded.
So if you read Death in the Haymarket, you will know that the early parts of the United States
were supported by a number of politicians.
Dude, but back.
Saw the power.
They'll be after challenge Mongolia board, so would they?
And began working with the labor movement.
Mongolia has a little bit more access to Outer Manchuria and Tuva, on top of the Gobi Desert. Mongolia would be a little bit more of a target more so than Russia. If anything, they'd probably just work out an agreement with Russia where they can have like autonomous business interests in that region and have at least semi-autonomy, and Russia can still at least have some autonomy in the region as well.
Really, what they want is the status quo to continue.
I mean, that's the likely scenario. Those two are far more willing to work together.
All of these people that pay lip service to these grand ideas,
because their more broader grand interests don't necessarily overlap with each other. I mean, they do, but not so much to the point where they're willing to destroy each other.
And give a shrug off. Well, we tried.
Oh well, maybe next time. And then really what happens is that slowly but surely, like, because the example of Bernie Sanders sticks out like such a sore thumb, now you see a lot of recontextualization from lefties. Oh, Bernie was never base.
Bernie sucked always. Bernie never had a chance. Bernie was actually destructive. So you got all these people
trying to recontextualize Bernie.
Make themselves right, recontextualizing the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. That's the political line.
In the Middle East, Russia and Chinese ambitions overlap, but they're far more willing to work together. Notice when it comes to geopolitics, you want to know who the biggest like conflicts usually exacerbate with is Russia and America, or China and America, when it comes to this shit, like in Africa and the Middle East. Russia and China don't seem to have much conflict. So their ambitions might overlap there, but they're more willing to, you know, not have exacerbated conflict or proxy war with each other. I mean, if anything, they tend to back and build up to similar sides. So, again, they're more willing to work with each other, even geopolitically. They might not necessarily have, like, you know, the same end goals of some of these things, but it doesn't really matter. They still benefit from it. Because of how they do imperialism, Russia and Chinese imperialism is, honestly, I mean, say what you want, is more smarter than American imperialism. So, there's a little bit more incentive to work together. That doesn't mean it's good, but there's at least more of an incentive from the superpowers to do so. Especially when they have a common enemy, like the American imperialism and shit. I mean, regardless, imperialism is bad. I mean, but when you look at, you know, what's probably going to last longer when it comes to whose imperialism is going to be better at in that outcome, it's probably going to be either Russia or China. Doesn't make their imperialism good? Fuck no, because imperialism is fucking shit and shouldn't exist, and anti-imperialism is based beyond recognition. But when it comes to the long-term, just realistic outcome of what, you know, the biggest superpower might be, is going to either be China, the EU, or Russia. Because you're saying the EU represents a fourth superpower in the making, and it does. I think it is to a certain degree. It's a small one, but it's like a fourth minor superpower. You got the three big ones, and then you got like 2 or 3 minor ones. Like the smaller superpowers is the EU, India, and the vassal states of, you know, these bigger superpowers, like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel. They're not superpowers, but they're minor powers that are usually propped up by the superpowers, and if given their own volition, probably could. Usually with the benefit of these other ones, of course. Saudi Arabia couldn't be a superpower on their own. And neither could Israel. Or Iran. India, they could. EU, yeah.
And I'm just I'm already here. It's already happened. Midterms are right around the corner. For what? In aid of what? More oppression.
Fundamentally, what little does that change? What about my, you know, general outcome changes because of the superpowers, you know, changing the musical chairs up a little bit?
Where do I sign up? How much is one of those rifle Biden hats, man? That sounds like a good deal to me.
Such a good deal, bro. I'm an anarcho-Bionist, my dude.
The math of our production has always been so.
If such, when the uniform emerges, all states scared like the U.S. does, we'll see a German-led Europe.
Seriously.
Honestly, I kind of find their new German chancellor actually kind of based a little bit. He's actually taken this a little bit more of a, you know, not like a full-on hands-off approach, but this kind of like, hey, being like hardcore militaristic isn't it, chief? Like, let's actually kind of make it so Putin doesn't know what we're really going to do. Let's kind of, you know, make him confused. So instead, you know, so like, let's not send troops, you know, let's not sanction them yet, and we'll sanction them with this random thing, and then we'll just kind of sit for a while and do this, and, you know, so it's like he's kind of wanting to, like, kind of throw them off, instead of actually try to exacerbate and escalate tensions. So, I mean, it's just like, yeah, that sounds honestly a better way of dealing with things. Making them be like, oh, what is the West doing right now? They're not responding how I usually think when I move troops over here, and then I do this, and I set up post flag to make it look like there's war. You know, about the environment. And then the U.S. State Department also commits a few false flags to exacerbate the third. Well, that doesn't happen. Oh, the rest is not, yeah, it's not responding like I thought it would. So go it. You know, they're not exactly going to be like, you know, too fond of, you know, hey, knock it off. No, get over here. Sit. Sit. That
provides an actual,
hey, no.
measurable counterpoint to voting for a fucking Republican.
No.
Because I hate to tell you this, you take it back in time 20 years, and Biden is a Republican.
No.
The Overton window has shifted to the point. You're voting
Shut up.
for the alternative.
Hey!
But you're just voting for another Republican. So that's what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for another half-assed attempt to start a party that caucuses with the Democrats. That defeats the purpose.
No.
I'm talking about providing a venue for a candidacy that people can get behind. Because it's not tied to the very same organization that scuttled Bernie Sanders, that oversaw the rot of American progressivism to the point where it's no different than fucking 1990s conservatism now. That's what I'm advocating. And that's why people don't like it. Because it takes away the security blanket.
Zukov.
It takes away their easy lob. Every 2 years, it's real simple to go like,
no,
I'm a hardcore leftist, but right now we got to do that mathematical calculus, that harm reduction calculus. So give me my safety blanket on the DNC, and we're going to do the best we can to get these people in there, because that's what we can do. Cycle, 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 cycle. That's all we can do, cycle. All we can do is vote for the Democrats, guys. Next.
Imagine Russia will not be happy when you becomes fourth great power.
You don't see the inherent destructiveness towards any kind.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, because the EU is just like it's just like a more socially democratic, fucking capitalistic society of just like exploitation and shit. It's just a far more softer. And at least gives, you know, some sense of comfortability to the people, but that doesn't really make them better. I mean, they're just far more prolonged when it comes to their destruction of, you know, the general, like, you know, planet overall, and to our, you know, to ourselves as a people. So I mean, yeah, Russia wouldn't be, but I necessarily, you know, wouldn't be too fond of it either. The way I see it is currently China, America, Russia, and EU. I'd flip China, America around, but I pretty much agree. I mean, I'd say, like, it'd be, you know, the U.S., but, like, you know, that, well, you know, with, you know, like, China kind of growing a little bit, you know, kind of like, yeah, we're kind of growing up into that shit, bitch. And then you got, like, you know, the whole Russia thing, and, you know.
That's considered to be mainstream left, and find Republicans.
I guess, like, the, you know, the greater, equal or greater than, you know.
So it's not like they, of course.
So, because it's kind of been on the rise and shit, so. Eventually will.
I don't care where you stand on the political compass. Right. Privatization. War.
More war, Jack.
Conference of war powers.
I mean, I think this entire conversation is just kind of forcing that point.
To the executive.
I'm kind of listening in the background.
Window shifting. You cannot contextualize that as
I'm actually turning that now. No, I'm missing some good takes. No, let's talk about labor for a minute there. Considering the mass importance of that, including in Ukraine, Russia, and China, and globally, internationally.
The window is shifted left on social issues. You're absolutely right. And let me give you a hot take.
That's fair.
While I couldn't be happier to see a shift left on social issues,
systemically it hasn't.
I also understand what an amazing smokescreen social issues are to obfuscate.
Because systemically it hasn't. If anything, it's been kind of the opposite.
And absolute war crime that underpins
with book burnings, anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans legislation being passed statewide.
That the lot of a gay person is better now than it was in the '90s, but
something to be happy
economically
for,
so,
celebrate.
that's just not true.
But that ain't, yeah.
Economically speaking, a gay person that was poor in the '90s is still fucking dirt ass poor now. Economically
Same
speaking,
trans person.
a trans person that lives in a
I mean, honestly,
state
they're probably
that
like a
doesn't
trans
have,
person or a gay person is more likely to commit suicide because of these
services in order
issues.
to help them with that
Because of
transition.
being in poverty and shit, those people are even more likely to commit suicide or even be in those circumstances and be more impoverished and more exploited in certain ways than, just any other average, common person, like, a cisgendered person or whatever.
Seems to have shifted
I mean,
from just
that's just a fucking fact.
due to completely and utterly arbitrary personality traits and orientations. But by the same token, as those things have gotten better, everything else has gotten worse. So if we focus on that as the crown jewel proof that leftism works, we ignore the rest of the world. We ignore the oppression that we heap on those very self-same people.
Absolutely.
In the developing world.
Top of that, also kind of undermining the more social conservatism that still lingers in a lot of leftist movements and shit. Because actually one thing to kind of bring it to that whole, like, Ukraine shit, like, one thing I've noticed that there was also, at least to some degree, like, actual, like, kind of left movements in between. But one thing I noticed on, like, their pages on, like, what their general, like, philosophy are, you'll see, like, they have, like, direct democracy or whatever the fuck and shit like that. Like, Big Ten, or, like, centrism, whatever the fuck. But sometimes, though, like, in things that'll be, like, left-wing, Marxist economics and blah, 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 they'll also be, like, social conservatism. I'm like, oh. So, pretty much like the equivalent of what, I guess, NASBOs are. Like, economically left, but very socially right-wing. So, homophobic as fuck, anti-trans, probably racist as fuck, too. Generally are. So...
people of color and immigrants. A rising tide raises all ships.
It's the one thing that those fucks forget about. NASBOs and a lot of these more right-winging, socially lefties and shit that are like, yeah, fuck the gays or whatever because they undermine actual workers or some shit. Or whatever bullshit that they want to make up. I mean, it's like...
That's how you do it.
I don't think they realize that, racing their ships also races theirs too. Whether they like it or not.
Nice. An arm around the shoulders is nice, but man, it doesn't really put turkey on the table, does it?
It's like, here, we helped you out. Yeah, that plate there, it's empty. Yeah, I know. It's okay. I've heard of assholes thinking China's an asshole state. No.
I blind you.
Who's a good boy? You good boy.
Out of the sun. It's nice.
Your little booty needs brushing.
A bit more fully in the shade.
Not really all of you, just your booty.
I'm looking forward to that eventually. Praise the sun.
Here comes the sun, doo doo doo. Well, at least you don't have mats. This is all disheveled. There you go.
Praise the sun. Isn't it like this? I have my palms turned up. That's wrong, right? It's like this. Well, you guys can't see.
Praise be the sun.
It's like this, right?
And Zukov getting a nice little brush. Stop eating the brush, Zukov. This is not a treat or a toy. This is a brush. I brushed you with this. So you're nice and brushed. I have no son.
I think George Carlin might have been onto something there.
It's kind of sprinkling, actually, if
He
anything.
worships the sun.
Cloudy and sprinkly.
I think that might be the
I think China's a mix of authoritarian capitalist, authoritarian socialist.
figured out.
They're just honestly a very hardcore authoritarian capitalistic society. State capitalist system.
Enslavement of people half the world away is something these people like to think about. That's how the rest of us account.
I mean, to a degree, there's like
You mean like
socialist
both
tendencies,
the
but
Democrats and Republicans
it's like by that
have
logic,
basically
so
got
does
a
America.
cycle.
America has
Whatever
authoritarian and
Republicans do to
socialist
undermine democracy,
ideas
the
too,
Democrats
just nowhere near enough.
undermine
Or
democracy.
nowhere near as much, I should say.
I don't know. What's going to happen? Seems like democracy might get undermined. Maybe wrong.
Well, the props to democracy, very easy to abide.
The Democrats
And
have
to
not
thwart.
refused election results like in 2020. What was Russiagate about? You remember the...
Yeah, Democratic Party being so about Russiagate, and now, coincidentally enough, the Democrats are somewhat in power, and now they have bipartisan work on trying to exacerbate with Russia
What was that?
further.
Did that not happen too? Or is that too far in the past to be pulled up in your memory and used as historical data?
Oh, that was like years ago. That was like 5 years ago, bro. That was a long time ago.
You know, ancient fucking history.
Oh, so old, man.
Yeah, the Democrats would never undermine the integrity of elections.
Well, Americans are educated on Chinese history, still think the mountains are in charge. Yeah, last night when I was with my friend,
proven true
when my friend was over, we were talking about that a little bit.
Due to Russian interference. What was proven true is that Russians made efforts into affecting our electoral cycle. But everybody just kind of ran with it, didn't they? Stole it.
Oh my God.
Trump stole the election, not my president. He stole it. But a Democrat would never undermine the sanctity of an election. They would never claim that a certified elected president is not legitimate. That's never happened.
Oh, no, never at all.
Non-Trump examples of that. Oh, wait. Yeah, you can. You guys may not remember this. In fact, a lot of you won't. You guys remember George H.W. Bush?
Yeah.
There were claims of electoral fraud and tampering and the illegitimacy of his presidency on his second election. You can look into it.
It's part of the reason why he didn't get a second term.
Fact check me. Who was proffering those ideas?
Democrats.
Who was proffering the idea that there was some kind of malfeasance and vote tampering going on? Who was proffering? Was it the right arguing against their own candidate?
No, definitely not. Why would they do that? Especially when there was a war going on that he wanted him to finish. Right?
If you really actually look at it, for a long time now, the election is only fully fleshed out with integrity if the Democrat won. But if the Republican won, there were problems, and the same thing goes the other way. That was a duly elected president if it's a Republican. Democrat wins though, oh, fraud, stole
election.
You guys act like the last electoral cycle was the only electoral cycle that ever happened.
Honestly, like most electoral cycles are always going to have this, especially a group of people who are always like, oh, they stole it, blah, blah, blah. I remember the midterm, like the second term for election for Obama, where the Republicans thought that Obama stole the election from fucking Romney. And there was a legit more, of a solid victory for Obama then than Trump with Biden. And they thought the same shit then. It's like this whole election meddling bullshit, it's always been a thing. They always use it as a fucking tactic. Go figure.
Make one instead of saying that.
It's like, so what makes Trump and his bullshit unique? Oh, because he has a bunch of MAGA chuds with him in January 6th? Yeah, okay. Sure, fair, but fundamentally the whole actions in themselves aren't different.
Al Gore did. When the election was called for George W. Bush, Al Gore absolutely refused to concede for weeks.
Yep.
Actually...
Yeah, in fact, there's actual merit that he was wrongfully fucking defeated. So...
Does that not count? Once again, that recent history blind spot is hitting different for some of you guys right
now. I might not be the biggest, like, more recent political American history aficionado, but I know these basic generals things. Especially in, like, the 2000s onward, since I fucking lived it. Even if I was a wee little lad.
Very easy to
But I remember what fucking people were thinking, especially during like the Bush-Obama years. And during 2012, people like my fucking parents legit thought that like for the first few weeks that Obama stole it. I'm not even fucking kidding. And of course, Trump comes around, he loses. At least especially my dad, more so I think. Thinks the same thing. Go fucking figure. Dems somehow, special in not doing that.
Things that make you go,
Russiagate, HW, George W. Though that one's kind of more legitimate considering the actual case of the context of that.
How do you know?
I mean,
you know that for an absolute fact. So you know for an absolute fact that in the history of the Democratic Party, take Hillary out of it, or put her in the milieu. That's never happened. Nobody's ever made a phone call to a governor and been like, hey man.
Before phone calls, they were either making actual in-person visits or sending them little letters.
I'll have to make it swing my way a little bit.
And those letters, they usually had nice fat wads of money or nice juicy check in it too.
Nah, never happened. Man. They wouldn't dare.
That never happened though.
Yeah, fucking
Nah. Nah, they just gave them the old reach around once they're in the house. That's how they did it. They just said pretty please and gave them a reach around and hope for the best.
Yeah. Bill Clinton didn't make our country a laughing stock. Yeah. The world definitely respected Bill Clinton. Barack Obama didn't make our country a laughing stock. He wasn't a total fucking disappointment president. The whole political world started with Donald Trump. You guys may not know this, but like, you may hear people talk about over 200 years of American political history, but really, like, politics.
That's just what it is. It's like ancient history. It's like you might as well think it was like actually the 1400s.
Really.
I mean, it's old.
There's really no other reference point that you should look at.
It's just like stuff that you kind of look at and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. That happened. So don't worry about it. Everything from like 1999 onward is what you should worry about. And even then, it should actually be like 2010 onwards.
You say that it doesn't matter.
That's actual, like,
behavior, nothing beats Trump and
like president right there, boy.
That buffoonish behavior made black people's lives worse, immigrants' lives worse, gay people's lives demonstrably, economically, physically worse. Then I'd go with it. But the fact of the matter, when it comes down to brass tacks, their checkbook, their bills, their debt, their student debt, their weed rap from back when they were 16 that still haunts them to this day, none of that has changed. The fundamentals of
because it's very hard to get a job once you have a record.
Not one iota.
And if you have a record from an eighth of weed or something, in the state that you live in that's still illegal,
mean man say bad
from like 20 years ago, it's still gonna hurt you.
Both of them do bad thing, but mean man say bad thing.
Mean man say bad thing, it has even like on TV do bad thing. Other person don't do mean thing on TV. He look respectable. He look like good bad bae. He looks like a good bad bae.
He's expanded on almost every Trump program that he spoke against. So
honestly, like the biggest one when it comes to that is really the whole immigration shit.
They made hay with him.
Like, cause he was absolutely like, yeah, we're gonna help with this whole immigration thing. We're gonna stop what Trump has been doing, but he's just allowed it to keep going. And if anything, it's like 70% more people have been detained than in Trump's first year so far.
ICE raids.
Yeah,
Ramped up.
he's ramped that shit up.
Border enforcement. And ramped
Not seeing too many protests on that.
People in these facilities.
Not seeing people getting tear gassed by ICE thugs and shit because of this
But he
shit,
doesn't
really.
put a smile on his face. I love Latino people. I love the strong tradition of these workers, Jack. Now get in a cage.
Don't take your children and put them somewhere else, too. Shove them inside a room with
But
50 other kids.
say bad things, so
Tiny little room meant for like 10 kids, but shove 50 in there, Jack. You know the thing. Like, there's still kids that haven't been reunited with their fucking families yet, still.
Undeniably have power to influence the outcome of it and to speak out against it.
It's just like, what
All for it.
the fuck?
He was all for it until it was useful as a political football. And then
Same thing, $15 minimum wage. That one was even obvious even before he was going to get elected. He was never going to be in favor of that.
Do not come. You want to
Do not come.
The starkest example of what I'm talking about. Take a look at Kamala Harris and the Coyote speech. You guys remember the Coyote speech? You probably don't, because it happened like a year ago. In the run-up to the election, when Kamala Harris was still candidate. Kamala Harris, not VP nominee Kamala Harris. She made a speech on an interview, shot in 60 minutes or something, where she said, I want you to imagine that a mother in El Salvador hires a coyote to take her and her children across miles and miles of a dangerous, politically unstable country. The opportunity to come here. And how can we turn that mother away? How can we tell her?
I don't know, go to Guatemala and tell her to do not come.
To take that chance for her and her children.
Backstabbing, conniving, evil fucking bitch, dude.
As soon as she's elected, do not come.
Do not come.
Do not come.
Do not come.
If you're in one of these caravans, do not come. You will be turned back.
You will be turned back, so do not come.
Maybe we stop paying attention to what comes out of politicians' mouth and start paying more attention to what politicians do.
Oh.
Maybe that's a good idea.
That, what? Looking at what politicians do versus what they say? Really?
Let's just keep walking around.
I thought them saying stuff was all you needed.
Help the person not being able to really show it and getting mad when people.
So looking at like their records and
the golf ball
and like their advocacy
the football
and their where their money comes from is probably a good idea.
I have to protect.
That's some five-head shit right there. Wow.
At all costs.
Someone ought to, like,
Man, I was wrong.
Get that information out there, dude. People need to know.
People are gonna say I'm an idiot. So I gotta keep being an idiot. You can't be called an idiot if you're consistently an idiot. Then I'm saying you were right and right along.
I mean, it's true. All you have to do is just basically be like, hey, Jack, listen, no malarkey. I just want to say that there just be a lot of idiots out there, but I'm definitely most consistent one. Can't call me an idiot when there's people out there being just more blatantly idiots when they're supposed to not to be. They're true idiots. I'm not. I'm consistently being one all the time, Jack. Hey, baby. What's up, buddy? You want a little something? You want this like triple, what is this thing? Triple flavored wings. Premium chicken, delicious pork hide, long-lasting beef hide. Well, it's not long-lasting with Zukov around.
She encouraged more people to do it before the election to make herself look like that she was actually planning on doing it.
Oh, you almost caught it.
The immigration system at the border anymore. Pretended, told people that she was going to do it, and then immediately do not come when she gets elected. That's the point.
Well, hey, nothing will fundamentally change, Jack.
She never had a need.
I mean, Biden said that too. I always like to remind people that.
It's lip service.
Because honestly, I mean, all in all, just like the politics of America really just like feel vindication for me every step of the way. Like, I mean, fuck, when I was first started streaming, I was having these similar feelings. I mean, I was probably a little bit more optimistic in the sense that, like, yeah, I'm gonna hope for Bernie and shit, but that's gone. But I mean, nonetheless, my general philosophy about things, aside from where that energy is more directed at, like, back, when I was first doing it, like, it was like, you know, the whole emphasis on unions and labor and all, and those ideas specifically weren't necessarily on the forefront.
What you just did was the death rattle of your argument. Because I'm not willing to sit and pretend that Joe Biden somehow is better. I must be a Trump fan. I must be just like secretly hoping that we get another Trump.
Secret Republican, huh?
Your argument. It's the ultimate baseless accusation to support something that otherwise has flimsily and easily been dismantled here today by me.
Hey, even though you're like leftist as fuck, you're actually secretly a Republican, bro. You want Trump. I remember getting that, honestly. Especially, like, once the end of his first term came around. It's like, oh, so you actually want him, huh? It's like, what? Who's been saying that?
There's a labor shortage. How about greasing the path and allowing people to come here? How about living up to the creed that sits on a statue of liberty, giving you a tire before you're hungry, you're out of masses, you're free. I hold my lamb beside the golden door, etc., etc., etc.
I don't know, abolish that fucking border.
How about we streamline the process for people that are abused in their own countries to come here and have a better
citizenship, better opportunities.
How about we integrate their unique...
Fundamentally, that's kind of the whole idea about what America's supposed to be about, at least one of the positive ideas of it.
Bring them in and spice up the fucking stew that is the United States.
Yeah. Because it makes for, even in the culinary world, some good stew. Get somebody else from a different part of the world to come by and spice up your stew, quite literally. Oh, hell yeah, bro.
Sounds pretty good to me.
It does.
Sounds good.
I mean, the plight of the immigrant and labor have always been intertwined hand in hand. I mean, considering that, you know, if somebody's coming to another country, especially for seeking better opportunity, I mean, how in the fuck is it not at that point? They're coming here to use their labor to seek better opportunities here, which also benefits here, you know, as the state. So, how, like, that is just by proxy an overall win-win-win. Win for that person coming here, win for the overall community they're there, and win for the state, so to speak, because they get the taxes and all that shit for the person being here, and, you know, provide, you know, kind of bring it back into it. It's just a kind of a general overall win.
The one thing that scientists have been most egregiously wrong about when it comes to climate change over the last 30 years is exactly how fast it was going to happen. The projections from the 80s, they're dire, but
look at those ears.
They're a lot less dire than the reality today. So scientists, if anything, have been and continue to be, in my opinion, abundantly overcautious when it comes to their projections. So assuming that that's over and scientists have kind of finally decided, like, hey, let's just give them the worst case scenario, then we're talking 50 years, 60 years. If not, then it could be 20 years. To be, you know.
You were just a little cuddle monster this morning. You were just all cuddly this morning, weren't you?
But whatever.
He was just like stretch up next to me in bed, and I just like couldn't help but just like grab him and just like
do the best you can do, right?
Scoot him up a little bit and just hug him.
Democrat. Hey.
Cuddle with him for like an hour. He was just chilling, being sleepy. Sleepy little boy. Just cuddle monster you is. Look at you.
Make no bones about it. I mean, I live to see it.
Look at his little ear.
But some of you will. You can remember me saying it. The world will fundamentally change when climate change really starts to kick into gear.
Oh my God! Don't remind me.
Especially at the equator. Over half of the population of the Earth lives on the equatorial belt or within 1,000.
And there's going to be probably the biggest, well, not probably, it will be the biggest migration crisis the world has literally ever seen.
That is going to become,
especially on recorded history, and that's going to be beyond McFucking insane. That I honestly can't comprehend it. I could try to like like try to quantify an elements, or at least parts of it, but there's no real way for me to truly like quantify that all.
From 1980, and then look at a map of Louisiana's coastline now, and you can, there's no denying. So yes, it's already kicked in, but we're talking about, you know how like, you don't drive a stick, you probably won't get this, but you know how like you wind up first gear?
I have
and
never.
You've gotten all the power you can out of first gear. You shift into second, all of a sudden you've got a little bit of extra torque.
And a little
pump. Wheels.
Get a little pump. I've driven manual like 3 times in my life, and I'm never doing it again. Every time I've nearly or have wrecked the damn thing.
These things are exponential. So as these problems continue to happen, at first they come off as worrying but relatively minor things, but when the compound effect of those things continues to get worse, there's a gear shift.
And each gear shift is just getting more and more exacerbated as you get faster.
Biden going to save us than who? Did you really think Biden was going to save you?
Biden's here to save us, okay?
Was that really ever a thought that went through your head? Because if so, man, you got problems bigger than I can fucking address, I think.
Oh my God.
Thought, genuinely,
you know, Biden might be able to save us, so I'm gonna vote for him. Oh my God, that actually makes me like wince.
Economic disparity, capitalistic overdrive.
I feel bad for whoever thought that, or just for anybody that unironically thought that ever in their tenure of existence.
Do you really think that Joe Biden was going to step in on your behalf with those things at any point ever?
Oh my God.
And if so, what led you to that? What led you to believe that? Was it a close examination of his voting record? His long political career?
Which is actually really bad.
That, you would have found an authority.
Like, he supported segregation for buses, had the whole crime bill thing.
To boot.
Pro-war.
Guy that never
for the Patriot Act.
Of austerity come across his desk that he didn't like. A guy that called black people super predators and said that he didn't want his kids going to school in a racial jungle.
Didn't care that if Haiti were to fall 500 feet below the sea.
Vehemently opposed.
And to walk back his racist comment, he said, or be raised 500 feet above the sea.
What led you to believe that Joe Biden was going to take your side?
He doesn't seem like he loves Haitians.
Because it certainly wasn't his voting record. So what was it? Was it the sweet words of a streamer? Was it the sweet words of a political entity that you've come to trust to do your thinking for you?
Probably.
Is that what convinced you that Joe Biden was going to be a return to normalcy? Is that what convinced you that Joe Biden was going to step in and be the leader?
Just the overall democratic zeitgeist of like, hey, the other person's just that more meaner. So, and things can get back to normal once he's gone. Trust us, guys.
How you form your thought process and your
I mean, it's like, good God. It's sad. I mean, it does honestly make legit kind of strike me as sad when someone really is like to a level of that thinking when it comes to like just the overall general view of the state affairs of the country. It's like, this person will save us because they're just not as mean and bad like this other person. It's like, they're not good either, motherfucker. Biden will save us, I promise you guys. Even though he's not really good at all. And it's actually made things just kind of slightly worse by literally doing fuck all.
For the people that you claimed to.
And like one of the very few good things he actually did do expired. The child tax credit. So go figure. Let Bill Bat better die. Didn't actually, fervently fight for it, twist arms, or, heavily push that. Go
Shout
figure.
Loud so the people in the back can hear.
A boy been duped.
Goose egg. Oops.
What time is it? Almost time for that good old work grind. Ugh.
You know why?
I'm actually gonna see. I'm at work. Hopefully, I'll be able to find more information about the whole union agreement. Because at least, because obviously when politicians and the fucking state, doesn't fix things, if anything slowly makes things worse, you have to start, essentially, having an institution organization, take it into your own hands. via labor at that point. Maybe it's some direct action. Because that's honestly, at this point, the only real fucking way to get shit done. Especially on state level. Because the only real progress so far that's been made in the country is really been statewide. So, that's really honestly the best course of action with it.
And let's not forget the fact that he leaned super heavily on the fact that he was in Barack Obama's orbit. He basically ran as, I'm the guy that Barack Obama spent time with. And unfortunately, that was enough for a lot of black communities.
It was. But anyway. Heading off to work, so.
You don't vote for me, you ain't black, man.
If you don't vote for me.